Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We have Mr. Om Dhungel today with us. I'm your host, Nabin.
Hi everyone, it's Suzanne.
And basically we're here for a chat with Mr. Om about, basically we went off his book, which we read recently, and I found it super interesting, the journey you've been through. It resonated with me and I think a lot of people within the Australian community, especially the Australian Nepali youth. And I thought, this is great. There's some stuff in there that, while I was reading, reminded me of my childhood. There's parts, we'll get to it later, that, parts where you were new here and, you had your daughter here and you went to pick up your wife, but you couldn't leave her in the room and everyone would be in the car late at night. So things like that, I kind of resonate with that. And there's a lot of themes in there that kind of I resonate with that. And I think it's a super inspirational story from where you've come, losing identity, where you thought what your home was turned into something else. And then even then, from Bhutan to Nepal, from Nepal to Australia, your identity has constantly evolved. So, I want to poke and prod a little bit. So if we can start maybe, just an overview of how you started and what your journey from your childhood going into, what happened to you. If you wouldn't mind, starting.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Susan and Naveen, I think I just want to congratulate you for starting something, like this. I think this will be a great service for people, especially young people, who are going through different challenges, and doing a podcast like this really helps people to overcome some of the challenges where they don't know where to go to. Sometimes they're reluctant to ask for help, but just listening to someone and getting some tips
and sometimes
to change their lives really helps.
Exactly.
I just want to congratulate you for doing this.
Thank you so much. And sometimes it's hard to ask for help when you're in you've got a cultural difference here. And like in our culture, it's hard to ask for help on deep subjects.
That's right.
Experiential things, even your parents have learned. It's hard for us to go up to our parents and ask them, hey, what about this? And, communication's not the greatest, generally speaking. So it's good that there's an outlet now for us.
Thank you. And secondly, I really want to thank you for giving this opportunity to have that conversation. Well, to start my own life journey, I grew up in a very remote village called Lamidara in the Chirang district in southern Bhutan. I grew up in a village where there was no electricity, no roads, no telephones that we have today. And I first saw a car when I was 10 years old. Not a car, a truck.
A truck.
And so, we had to walk hours and hours to, go to the nearest, town center. So I grew up in that environment, but thanks to good education, I was able to, study, and, later on, I studied engineering and started working for the government in the Department of Telecommunications. And within a very short period of time, I rose through the ranks and was the head of planning and development in Bhutan Telecom. But things turned out differently. I thought I had the best life in the world. Newly married, I had the best job in the world. I was, the part of the system where we were able to build a telecommunication network in Bhutan, because when I first started, there was very little. And few of my friends together, we built the network, and we had one of the best telecom network in the region by 1992. And but then, Bhutan carried out an ethnic cleansing policy, and my father was put in prison, tortured severely, and many of my other relatives faced the same situation. Personally, I was, targeted because some of my relatives had fled the country, and I was kept under surveillance for a year since 1991, and then by 1992 April, when I learned that I was going to be arrested, then my wife and I decided that the best option for me was to leave the country by myself, and I fled the country, leaving me and my wife and a 2-year-old daughter, never knowing I would ever see them again.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we were reunited afterwards, and then I spent 6 years in Nepal volunteering in set up schools and hospitals. And but I was a little crazy. After 5 years, I started thinking what next.
Yeah.
And that's when I started dreaming of doing an MBA.
Yeah.
And managed to come to Australia, did an MBA, and started new life all over again. So that's my journey.
Yeah,
quick,
general journey.
Very
Yeah.
quick.
Can you give a bit of context? When you say I was arrested, it seems like why was he arrested, right?
Yeah.
But
I was
the
not arrested, but I was about
nearly
to be
arrested.
when
Yeah,
I
but it
knew.
still sounds quite heavy, But you haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
A little context as to what you're talking about, like the political cleansing that you're talking about,
Yes,
because you identify as a Bhutani, Nepali.
Yes.
Now Australian.
Yes.
But why was there such a the ethnic cleansing, the political cleansing?
Yeah. Okay. During the early, I should say mid 80s, government, started implementing policies that were targeted against the southern Bhutanese of Nepali origin. And this included, creating a green belt. For example, the government decided that 5 kilometers along the border with India would be converted into forests by evicting people.
Right.
So my in-laws are from Chiang Mai in Samji, which is very close to the border. So my father-in-law was given 6 weeks' time to demolish the house. There's a concrete building there. He was given 6 weeks to demolish the house and move somewhere.
Right.
Now, with the intention of planting trees.
Yeah.
So how absurd is that? So this was one of the problems. Secondly, they stopped the teaching of Nepali language in southern Bhutan, which was taught up to primary level, but that was stopped. But it was not only stopped, but government or the army came out and burned the books, which created a lot of sentimental feelings against the government. Thirdly, they carried out, the most important one was government carried out census where we were required to produce a tax receipt that was paid back in 1958.
Yeah.
Now, come 1985, you are asked to produce a tax receipt that you paid back in 1958. If you couldn't produce that, you're not a citizen. You're not a citizen anymore.
You're not a citizen, right.
So you'll be categorized in different categories.
Right.
If you're married to, someone from India or Nepal, then you are categorized in a different category.
I see.
And then you are liable to be evicted.
I see. So you're seen as an illegal alien, basically, in your own country because you couldn't reproduce your tax receipt for the house.
For that particular year. Now, we could produce a 1948 tax receipt. It wouldn't work.
But
you have to produce that particular year.
But
even if you did produce that, then they would find other excuses.
Yeah.
But what was so special about the year 1958? Why did they choose that year in particular?
Yeah, they enacted a citizenship law. There was a new policy started that year, so they put that arbitrary, and it was applied retrospectively. So arbitrarily they applied that year. Yeah.
So basically, you became. I guess.
Basically, what happened was once that situation was created, there were policies one after another. So women were asked to cut their hair, for example, cut it short.
Yeah.
Or priests who were going to do some puja, they were asked to. And dress code was another one, where we were forced to put the national dress at all times.
At all times.
No, putting a national dress is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it wasn't a problem at all because I studied in the north, and I always wear the go, and it wasn't a big deal. But for my grandmother, who was 80-something, to overnight change to a new dress. And it's not easy.
Yeah, and at all times it seems. At all times, it seems a bit aggressive, right?
It is, and it's a dress suitable for warmer climates.
Oh, I see.
Cold climates.
For colder climates.
Colder climate, and in the south,
so when it's,
in hot
when it's hot,
weather,
you're sweating.
You're sweating, and it's not suitable, to change that overnight.
Especially for older people.
To make that change overnight was difficult.
Right.
So when this government started implementing one policy after another against the southern Bhutanese, people finally were forced to protest. Now, if you have a pet, now if you start beating your Cairo, in the house, what would you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Fight back.
Yeah.
So same thing happened. So people started protesting. And then when the protest happened, then the king and the government decided, how dare you protest? And started, arresting people, putting them in prison and torturing them. So my father fell into that, process. He had never protested. He hadn't done anything. He just happened to be a fairly well-known, a villager, running his own business. We had a shop, and we had decent land and all that. So because they were prominent villagers, they picked up those prominent villagers and started putting them in prison and torturing them with the intent that other people will just see that if so and so is arrested, then what about us? So they would willingly then run away. So they were put in prison, and they were told that unless you leave the country, you will continue to face this.
Fear by demonstration, so people would be...
So after 3 months, my father was released from prison, but he had nowhere to go. So he agreed that he would leave the country, but he had nowhere to go.
Right.
So he stayed back. The soldiers came back again after a few months, and then took him back and tortured him again. So again, he agreed that he would leave, but he had nowhere to go. So he stayed on. So they came looking for him the third time, and luckily he wasn't home. So my mom forced him, they would kill you, just run away. So he ran away, and then left the country. And then finally we managed to get my mom to Thimphu, where I was living, and then we sneaked her out. We similarly got my sisters and others, and then sneaked them out as well. And we left our property, everything, our shops, everything there.
So do you think because of the xenophobia from the northern, or the majority of the Bhutanese people, that it seems a bit strategic?
Yes.
Very small increments of these policies to push people out. Was that because you're in our territory, you have your own kind of Nepalese way of doing things, which is not particularly like a Bhutanese thing? Is that?
It wasn't that, because we were integrating really well. For me, for example, I have best of friends from the north. I've studied in the north, and I speak the language, and we were so well integrated. And for me, again, as a civil servant, I was never discriminated. I became the head of planning and development within a very short period of time. My minister himself, pushed hard to get me promoted, and there was things were going well. But that time, I think government decided that, and the king sort of become part of that process, where they decided that they needed to decrease the ethnic Nepali population, and how they would do was by physically evicting people from the country, and to do that, arrest them, torture them, and some would run away themselves.
Create fear, basically.
To create that fear, and then people started leaving. Either they were forced out to leave, others were terrorized, and they left. So it was an ethnic cleansing, basically. And then, a lot of people fled, and others who protested were put in prison, tortured, and some people are still in prison.
So, reading through, you met the king a couple of times.
Yes.
in person, right? When I read that, I was like... but it's not uncommon, because it's such I feel like... a community-based, very strong community-based country, like Bhutan and Nepal, right? And knowing the king isn't that, I mean, it is grand, but to be in that kind of space, how did you feel, reading it sounded like you were very patriotic, you're looking at the king. I mean, then, being in his presence, you weren't, you couldn't look, which you had troubles later when you came to Australia.
It was a problem, yes. Again, I need to describe the situation exactly what it was then. So when I first met the king, I had finished my year 10, and we were invited to the palace. And king was effectively like a CEO. He was all over the place. He knew what was going on in the whole country. He was very active king. And he was such a inspirational person, because as a year 10 student, he got to meet the king. And he talks to you and say, hey, we are doing this, power project. We are doing this project, that project, and we want you to go and study and come back and serve the country. Who wouldn't want to serve the country?
Exactly.
And he was that inspiration. And I still remember, he asked me, what do you want to be? I said, I want to become an engineer. And then second time I met him, or third time I met him in I was studying engineering in Dhaka. And we met him again. And he said, he asked the person next to me, Dr. Bamparai, he passed away last year. And, a lot of respect for him because he was one person, he spent all his life for the cause of human rights and democracy in Bhutan. And he was doing his master's and he was sitting next to the king. He said, what are you studying? He asked him. And he skipped me. He said, you're doing engineering.
He remembered you.
He remembered
that.
Yeah.
So, again, all the more reason that the king remembers me, what I'm doing.
Must be empowering, right?
It was so empowering.
Yeah.
And similarly, I met several times, and when the king made that official visit to Bangladesh, again, I was asked by the ambassador and the government to sort of stay with in the state guest house with the king. So we were given Dr. Bamparai, and I was given a room next to the king's one.
Right.
And we were staying with them in case the king and the royal party needed anything locally because we had the local knowledge and all that. So we were almost, assistants, staying in the state guest house. So I had several of those interactions, and he has been my inspiration. But when this problem happened, I started thinking, how would the same person do this? And it's not only me. Say, for example, my brother-in-law, my wife's older sister is married to Bhimsuba. He was the head of power department.
Right.
And sometimes we'd be at home and he'd get a call from the king.
Yeah.
And we'd be discussing about the power tariff and all that. The king.
The king. You're speaking to the king on the phone.
On the phone.
And they used to have that discussions.
Right.
And he was so close to them. And my wife's uncle, again, my aunt's husband, R.B. Basnet, he was, great footballer and, tennis player. So he was King's tennis partner.
Wow.
And they were very close.
Yeah.
But then when this problem happened, the king didn't bother to talk to them. They were very senior people. It would have been, nice to talk to them. Hey, what's happening? What can we do, to stop this happening?
Yeah.
So this is where, I find it a little frustrating. On many of the senior people found it very frustrating, and they left the country because, they couldn't have that conversation with the king anymore.
Yeah.
They were not, trusted
there was a
anymore.
disconnect
there. And that's when the seven senior civil servants left the country. And that's when I was put under house arrest as well. I was not allowed to leave the country because I was related to them.
So it went from kind of like it was a quite close relationship to suddenly there's a shift.
Yes.
You're an alien, and now there's a cold shoulder from your community. Right?
Yeah. So this is where even today I ask this question. I want to, if I meet His Majesty, I want to ask him, hey, what happened?
Yeah.
What did you do wrong?
Yeah.
Because we were loyal civil servants, every one of them.
Yeah.
And suddenly this thing happened, and he decided that, okay, we don't need them anymore.
Because he was the source of your inspiration since childhood.
Yeah.
And education from the very, as a child.
Yeah.
I think education in your story is a very overarching theme.
Yes.
At a very young age, you are encouraged to study, and you rise through the ranks because you have education.
Education, yes.
I remember at one point, I don't know if you remember in the story, there are ministers that are not as educated as you.
Yeah.
And they feel kind of threatened by you because you're educated. So there's a strong sense of education is kind of very powerful, right?
Yeah.
And which is what also led you to, Australia ultimately.
Yeah.
So how would you say, to those listening, how has education shaped your life, your story, and continues to shape it today?
Yeah, I think broadly I sort of put education, I don't want to really stick to that traditional education.
Yeah.
I believe in learning. So it's not about doing a master's and a PhD, but about learning. I think that learning as a continuous journey is really important. So whatever it is, what you're passionate about, I think we need to learn more and be good at it.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that, I don't get a job, then I don't get a promotion, or things like that.
The corporate ladder.
Yeah, I always tell people that be too good to be ignored. if you're too good, you can't be ignored.
Yes.
Yes.
So, but then we start focusing on, oh, he got a promotion, and then we start talking about it. She got a promotion.
Yeah.
Not everybody can get a promotion sometimes, or maybe that's not the place for you.
Yes.
Keep excelling in what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is where I also, I had a dream to do an MBA, and then when I was in Bhutan, my wife and I, we had decided to go and do our masters together. She was doing public health, and I was going to do an MBA.
Yeah.
We decided to do that, but then these things happened, so that didn't materialize. And then when I became a refugee again, I hadn't given up that dream. After 4 or 5 years, again, of volunteering in the community, I thought, okay, let me rekindle this, dream.
Yeah.
And I started again. This doesn't work according to logic, but I started dreaming of doing an MBA as a refugee, and we made it happen. I used to actually, go into UTS.
Yeah.
When I was in Kathmandu, I had this brochure, and every morning I would close my eyes, go into the UTS, go to a level 13, 14, go in there, take my classes, and finish my classes. So you were visualize that
while you were a refugee in the camps.
Oh wow!
I didn't live in the camp. I was in Kathmandu.
Oh, you were in Kathmandu. So is that the time when you were running some kind of
the association?
I was the general secretary of the Human Rights Organization of Bhutan, and we used to publish a newspaper,
news articles to bring awareness to the situation that was happening in the camps and things like that.
It was called Bhutan Review,
right?
And we published that every month for 5 years, 4.5 years. And we used to publish the annual human rights report as well. And I was also a opposition spokesman for a couple of years. Yeah. So I used to travel a lot and do a lot of advocacy. And my focus was on education again.
Right.
Again, maybe we can go back to education.
No, we're going back.
That's more important.
Yes, what I wanted to say was a lot of people have...
I was just going to say, so the push was not necessarily having a degree, having education per se, but the want to learn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether it was from experiences, whether it's viewing people, or again a degree on the job experience.
Learning, and this is where we were at pain, and I think we can go back a little there, because when we became refugees, we thought we lost everything. But very quickly, we realized that we hadn't lost that capacity to love and care for each other.
Yeah.
Doctors and nurses started taking care of the sick, the elderly, and the vulnerable. And we had teachers. We started tree schools. And a lot of people ask me, what's tree schools? They're simply classes run under trees.
Oh, right.
We didn't have any huts. We didn't have any rooms. So out of frustration, some, because children were running around, they were not doing anything. So some of the teachers, they said, okay, I'll start my class 7 there, under that tree, because it was hot. We needed some shade. So out of frustration, some of the teachers started schools, classes under trees. And that's how a lot of those people have now. Some of them have become doctors,
yes, I remember.
And, somebody actually, I think she was just born, I think, but called me last year and she said, Uncle, I'm training to fly A320.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know what A320 was. She already flies a smaller one. But now she's training to fly A320.
Wow.
So the education from that place, because you had very skilled teachers, and I know reading it, there was a lot of enticement from, within Kathmandu for higher paying jobs of the teachers that were within the camps and all that. But they didn't go.
No,
they continued to teach their communities. There was a real push to, instill learning within, your tight-knit community. And it speaks to it now. People are quite prolific and they've gone. And it's the passion for learning, because I'll give you kind of at least my... Because from here... You go to, the high school system here, 10, 11, 12, and they go, hey, what do you want to do? And you just go, oh, for me at least, I was like, I don't know, I kind of like this. Maybe I'll try that. I think, generalizing again, 70 to 80% of the people that I've seen go into learning with that mindset. And I think because you're in such a position where you didn't have the opportunities or, the luxury to think about it that way, you were sitting there visualizing, you know, I'm going to go to the UTS. Because at a very early age, you were working within telecommunications.
Yeah.
I think, like, just from my analysis, there was a real encouragement and a push for you to be a part of society and to be a functioning part of society that instilled that, like, you know, want for learning, I think, right? Would you agree?
Yes. And I think ultimately, if you start thinking of not what job I want to do, I want to become an engineer, a doctor. Yeah. Maybe we don't need an engineer in 10 years' time.
Exactly,
Or a doctor, for example.
I think we'll need one.
Already people are going to Google doctor. I'm sure we'll need more. But again, like, you know, I'm picking up the wrong profession, but there are a lot of jobs will not be there in 10 years' time, right?
Exactly,
And we are talking about, I want to be this, I want to be that. But the way we need to see is, how can I be of service to humanity? How can I be of service? It's not about getting or what I want to be. What's my passion? What am I passionate about? And then how can I be service to humanity? So during that time, early years in the camps was very difficult. You know, people wanted to fight. People wanted arms. But then for me, like, you know, I don't know, I've never touched a gun. I don't know anything about arms. So we said, okay, any young student I met, I said, you know, what did you do in Bhutan? Oh, I finished here 10. Yeah. I'll help you to get to 11. We will help you to get to 11. Yeah. You need to go to school. Yeah. And at one time, we were threatened because some people were dead against it. You know, we want our youth to go and fight. And I thought, you know, if we go and fight, we'll lose our youth. We'll lose a generation of people, you know, because I've studied different war situations and struggles. And fighting doesn't get you anywhere. If you win with a gun, you need to sleep with a gun. And that gun might turn to anyone, anytime. So I never visualized a life like that. So we struggle hard to sort of convince young people to sort of, hey, we will try to get some scholarship. We will lobby with government. So that's what we did. The reason I was saying I was staying in Kathmandu was few of us, you know, we were able to stay in Kathmandu, managed to stay in Kathmandu on our own, and then almost work as an embassy there, like, you know, liaising with different governments, liaising with different international organizations, so that we can get some funding for our students. So my focus was mostly on education. How do we get more scholarship? How do we get young people to go back to school? Yeah. So that's what I focused on. Yeah, at the time.
And I think that also speaks to, because you had some kind of guidance, or a push to really learn, right? You wanted to be a service. You didn't necessarily want to be a telecommunications engineer specifically, right? You wanted to do something that was within your aptitude, capability, to do something and serve something and be to society. And that's what kind of started your want for learning. Yeah. And maybe you would attest to the fact that, you know, guiding these students, potential students, you wanted them to have that kind of guidance. And I think that's very important. You had something that you aimed for that these kids didn't have, but you were able to see past that and be like, if you do this, you will get there. Yeah. But you just need that push. Yes. And I think that's where the education system kind of fails here. Like, there's no real sense of, you know, a community-based, like a mentorship-based guidance on learning. So important, right? Because then you become like, okay, I can't really see where I'm going to end up. Yeah. But if you have a mentor, that is, maybe it's not the mentor that you want to, you know, pursue. That's not your idol. But there is a wider community that you can go, hey, hang on. Yeah. There's a doctor. There's a this. There's a this. Hey, me, I really love woodworking, and I have someone. I want to be him. Like, you know, it opens up a lot more. Like, okay, now I have a reason to learn. Yeah. And I think that's a big factor.
A why.
Yeah,
you know,
a why.
There's a why. Like, you know, if you're clear about a why, then it's easier to get there. Yeah. If not, then what happens? Like, you start making excuses, or something, little thing will set you up back. Yeah. And I think firstly, through your program, I want to say big thank you to all those teachers, you know, who were the leaders initially. We started those 3 schools. Because of them, we have a very successful refugee settlement all over the world. Like, you know, over 100,000 have been resettled now. And I just came back from the US and Canada, and, like, you know, people have talking about millions of dollars of, you know, running a business. Yeah. So, you know, like many of the programs in Kathmandu, you know, one of my village mate, actually, he's a goldsmith.
Oh, okay.
He sponsors many of the boys, Nepal boys and Boys of Nepal and all those programs. Yeah. And I was so
That's amazing.
thrilled, and I went looking for him, and took me a while, but managed to meet him, and we were able to hug each other and cry, because he was my neighbor, and not just a ordinary goldsmith, but now he's become so successful. Babilal Rasaili is very well known, and he sponsors many of the events in Kathmandu. So, it's all because of that desire to learn, desire to educate the children.
Yeah, and the connections that you have. The children don't know anything, right?
Yeah,
they read books because they're from their perspective, from a child's perspective. You go to school, you do your time, you read your materials, but you don't know why up until a certain age, and your mind is still growing.
Yeah,
and you don't know. But if there's someone to show you the way, hey, look, this is what's possible.
The young people. I think
how do you nurture?
Really, really important.
And that's I think I saw a key. Like there was a fire in you to kind of you've seen and experienced all of this rise up to the top.
Yes,
and obviously the very big fall after it, but then still having the resilience because you saw what you could do, and you had that fire because you'd be like, I was there because of this. You can too. I think you saw that, right?
Yeah. And once you know that, the thing is, like, it's dark already. There's going to be light tomorrow. Yeah. It's not going to stay permanently. It's not going to be dark all the time. Even if you go to the Nordic countries, like it may be dark for 6 months, but at the end of it, there's light.
There's light, exactly.
So that's so important to recognize that. When you're going through it, it looks difficult. It is difficult, but then it is true. So I'll tell you, maybe you are on to say something.
I was just going to say, you are actually a practical, realistic example of everything you're talking about right now. Like Nobin mentioned, the big rise, to be the head of the planning and developmental division in telecoms, and then the fall, the exile, and then to still come to Australia. And you started small, maybe. But
I started in a factory.
Your resilience, your experience from Bhutan and your views from the camps led you from a supervisor post to the duty manager post to then working at MTC, being board members of SSI as well. So we can see how these opportunities and that passion for learning has eventually, changed your path as well, despite the many hurdles that you faced. So even from your book, we see that there have been a lot of people who not necessarily, helped you greatly, but who guided you and provided you those opportunities, which led to your scholarships, for example, or it shows how important having the right people, again, touching back to mentoring, is in your life, to be able to be presented those opportunities and then to grow from your hardships. So talk to us about that a little bit.
You brought some really interesting point. One is, I think, we are neither, as human beings, we are neither dependent nor independent. We are interdependent. That's one thing we forget sometimes. When you're down and out, you think you need to depend on everybody. But, you always have something to give. You can always, like on the street, you can smile at somebody. And you can say that, oh, you look so beautiful. Why not? Susan, you look really beautiful.
Thank you.
It doesn't do anything. And I just say that if it's and you're looking very handsome.
Oh, thank you.
So, like, just to say that, it doesn't cost you anything. You may be down and out, like begging, or you may be, and we went through that phase where we were struggling what to eat tomorrow. But then we could always smile at somebody.
Even though you had nothing, you still had something.
Something to give. So I think the first thing to remember is we are neither dependent nor independent. We are interdependent. And secondly, like, I'll tell you the example of, like, whatever situation you are in, like, if you dare to dream, and then if you are able to courage to share that dream and make it happen, you can do that. Because when we were in, Nepal, like, one guy who had just finished year 12, he came to us and we were having a meeting, like, leadership meeting, and he came and said he wanted to share something. Said, what happened? Please tell us what. He said, I finished at 12. I want to be a doctor and help people in the camp. I need help. So we all looked at each other. We all refugees, equally helpless. And the other thing really hurt me was, like, the guy next to me pinched me on the thing and he said, maybe this guy doesn't know that he's a refugee.
Right.
And I felt very hurt. Like I was thinking totally different. I said, wow,
The
this
mentality.
fellow, like what?
Why is
courage,
it possible?
Yeah.
What courage this guy has.
Yeah. Why not nurture it?
Yeah, like I said, wow, what can I do now
Yeah.
to make that happen? It's my responsibility
Yeah.
now. So we invited him home, and then, long story short, it took us 9 months.
Yep.
We managed to admit him to medical school in Nepal.
Nice.
And 3 years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, he visited us with 2 kids and his wife. And he's now a professor in UK. And he also trains doctors,
Wow.
Right. That's
emergency
amazing.
doctors in Nepal remotely. And his name is Dr. Prakash Subedi.
Yeah.
Your mom knows him very well. They're friends, actually. I think yeah.
There are a lot of people that my parents know that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, they are classmates or close friends. Yeah. So he is my inspiration. Now, if this fellow from a refugee camp could come up with that courage, we were struggling what to eat the next day.
Yeah.
But this fellow,
Dare to dream.
dreaming to be a doctor. And in Nepal, it's not easy. You got to be stinking rich to be able to pay for that.
Exactly.
But then, we knocked many doors. We went to the, everybody, including the Prime Minister, and we got it approved through the cabinet that at least one refugee from the Bhutanese refugee camps in Nepal would be allowed to study medicine. One refugee from the Bhutanese refugee camp would be allowed to do engineering, and one from agriculture. So we had 3 professional courses reserved for our kids. So before I left to study here, I was able to admit 4 students to medical school.
That's
so at least there
amazing.
are 4 medical doctors that came through the refugee camps. So if we can create those medical doctors from a refugee camp, I think we can do a lot more here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the power of education, you can see that.
Yeah, exactly.
That-
And yes, so education was one part.
yes.
And segueing into your arrival to Australia,
Yeah.
I remember a distinct passage in there, because you've seen, you're down in the dumps. You've been in the refugee camps.
Yeah.
As you were saying, you don't know what to eat tomorrow. You come here, and by a series of events, you end up working for the MTC,
Yeah.
MTC, which was like a
It was a training and employment provider.
right.
Yeah, training.
So in a way, you're helping people.
Yes.
But on the other side, you somehow, because of your telecommunications experience, end up in Telstra.
Yeah.
And you're driving from one place to the other, I remember, and there's a distinct passage in there that says, there are some people at Telstra that are so rich and so abundant with what they have, the nicest BMWs and the money, and they're still unhappy and they don't know how much they have because they're still comparing to the people above them.
Yeah.
But then you go to the MTC, and it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Enlighten us, what is enough? How much is enough?
Yeah, I think that was really interesting because we used to have this, meetings and Monday morning catch-ups and all that. What did you do? And people would have, we went boating, we went doing this, that, and my story would be, I went to the airport to receive some refugees. Or, I was in somebody's house helping them to, use the vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, yeah.
Or, helping them to cook. And mine was the most boring thing. And the other thing was, I had a lot of friends who were earning 3, 4, 5 times more than me. And they were always, would I get my bonus?
Yes.
What if I don't get my bonus? And I was wondering, when, as you rightly said, what's enough and why are these people, so fussed about this?
Yeah.
Because I thought I had the best job in the world. And, I was earning, maybe 1/3, 1/4 of them, but still I was very happy.
Yeah.
And the job was really good. So I had the best job in the world.
Yeah.
And this is where I got thinking. And again, that's the reason I started sort of exploring. And, I found that, now we have got all this comfort and convenience of the world where maybe our king couldn't think of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
If you want now, a lot of people oh, I'm going home now, let me cool my house.
Yes.
And you can do it from
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool my beer or something.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can do that.
Yeah.
Or even staying home, it's hot, let's make it cool.
Yeah.
It's cool, let's make it hot, whatever.
Yeah.
And you do the same thing in your car. These days, they've got the car. They'll say, come over, the car will come and so on.
Yes.
So we got all this comfort and convenience in the world that we could not imagine 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
But then, are we happy?
Yeah.
Are we any happier?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Because think of that, medical student that studied so hard, right? And he's at a position now, but what ends up happening to everyone, I think, especially in the West, you come here, you studied hard, you've reached your goals, but then it becomes like, okay, I need more.
Yeah.
Like that same person that you nurtured and guided, maybe, I'm not saying he's the exact person, but everyone, ends up in that kind of cycle of, I want more.
Yeah.
I need that bonus.
Yeah.
I need that rise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's at what point, how do you become content?
Yeah. And I think having more it's not a bad thing. You want to have more, but why? I think, say, if I buy a, whatever car I like, I like a Mercedes Benz. And in today's context, I think everybody buys, Tesla. Yeah. So I buy my, dream car, Mercedes Benz, and keep it, in my driveway.
In your
I don't
nice
want to
driveway,
put it
nice
inside.
garage
No, I don't want to put it in my garage. I want to show that.
I have a nice car.
A nice car.
Yeah.
Now, Susan lives next to me, and then she buys a Tesla. Now, I'm totally miserable.
Yeah.
I need to buy a Tesla.
Yeah.
Otherwise, already my misery is started.
Yeah.
So, by that very simple example, we know that it's a game that you're playing. It's always a losing game.
Yeah. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
As they say.
So the only thing we can compare is, am I any happier today than yesterday?
Which
am
is
I
really
better?
hard.
Let's compete with ourselves.
Yeah.
Don't go into competition.
I think it's a relative concept, though.
Yeah.
Because what happiness means for you or you might not mean the same thing for me, because we're each going through our own struggles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For me, for example, my main focus was to get my permanent residency or to get my citizenship or to get my parents here, for example.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends as well on your own personal struggles and situation, because no matter how much you tell others, or for example, our parents used to say when we used to throw food or waste food, or look at the kids in the poorer countries not getting enough food, but because we haven't lived those experiences, it's a really relative concept to us. It seems like a faraway concept. So I think it really depends on how you materialize your struggles and I guess make it into something meaningful. But it's hard, like you said. It's really hard. It really depends person to person. You need to have a really high, I think, emotional intelligence and emotional quotient as well to be able to go that deep into thinking what happiness means for you. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think that's true. But then how do you sustain that? It's quite common. So it comes to basic. And I talk about the spirituality a lot more these days, because I found that I could live without religion, but I could not live without spirituality. Which means, it's about love, care, and compassion. Those are, I think, either we can say that they're across religions or they are above religion. Because even love, care, and compassion, a lot of religion will say, oh, this is, he doesn't belong to my religion. So it's okay to kill him or not. It's take care of my own religion. This happened during COVID, because I'm part of this leadership team in Blacktown, and when COVID hit, we had this emergency task force, and we are having this conversation, and a lot of people started asking for, I need vaccine for my community and vaccine for my community, and some were strong enough to lobby with the politicians and get some vaccines for their community. Then we started asking this question: What's your community? What happens to these elderly people next to her? Where do they belong to? So we are all Blacktown residents first. I live in Blacktown. So we are Blacktown residents first. Whoever needs to get vaccine. It's not about any community.
Everyone,
whoever is the most deserving, needs a vaccine.
Exactly.
Not about the power of your community,
Your community,
to lobby,
my community.
So let's not go. We are Blacktown community first.
It's strange that communities themselves become territorial.
Yes.
Right? Instead of becoming a one umbrella of community, it becomes, my community from this place and my community from this place. Because you've worked with a lot of different communities, like the Sudanese community.
Yeah, I work with across communities. And one of the things we're trying to do is, if we empower a person with a narrow identity, it can be dangerous. Because what happens, I think, even my own, again, take on what happened in Bhutan was, because it's a monarchy. Now, the king saw all of us as his subjects initially. But then when this problem started happening, when people around him started sort of putting this fear into him, hey, tomorrow the Nepalis might take over. When the fear started happening, maybe, again, I don't know, because he's the best person to tell us what
was going through his mind.
But then, because he's a king, now he was everybody's king. When he decided that he needed to protect the northern Bhutanese, he could do that at any cost. So it was to protect the northern Bhutanese.
Similar story.
He decided to evict the southern Bhutanese. So he's empowered with a narrower identity now. He had a broader identity as, initially was everybody was his subject. But then at the end, he decided that, I'm a northern Bhutanese. So northern Bhutanese, I need to protect them.
Right.
So he started protecting that narrower identity.
Yeah.
And to protect that narrow identity, at any cost, he evicted us. So if I consider myself as a Buddhist leader, I'll protect Buddhists at any cost. So if I'm powered enough, if I have enough power, then I could protect Buddhists at any cost by killing the others.
Right.
So it's always very dangerous to protect, someone with a narrow identity, or empower somebody with a narrow identity.
Yeah.
So this is a conversation we are having in Blacktown, and more broadly when I do my teaching.
Right. So this is
I do a lot of
currently
leadership, leadership training with community leaders, and this is one thing we start asking. We need to empower leaders with a broad identity, not with a narrow identity. You can't simply keep people in their cocoon, because in a country like Australia, we are such a diverse community. And if we start empowering leaders with that narrow identity, tomorrow when crisis happens, then the bigger ones can kill the other ones, the smaller ones, because they are more powerful. So this is something we need, the younger generation start thinking of, we are Australians first. We all are. If you live in Blacktown, we live in Parramatta, we are Parramatta residents first. And whatever diversity we have, we add on top to the richness of who we are as a society, not the other way around.
We want to get to, your identity part. But before we do that, there are a lot of, international students here with a similar kind of path that you've taken through. We're talking about empowerment, right? Empowering the youth. And a lot of the people, like the Nepalese community, and many, like international community, just broadly speaking, they come here and they undergo a lot of struggle. And I guess I want to talk about how, you can help them, because there's issues I'm sure you face, like, okay, I've got to get my residency, I've got to get enough points, I've got to pay for my fees, I've got to do this. So, you were very fortunate, that you got a scholarship at some point.
At the end.
But it was a struggle in the beginning, right? You had to go and live with other people, they were, gracious enough to give you a home. But during that time, what kept you going? Yes, you were away from your family for such a long period. Some people would fold under the pressure and, hit depression. And how do you keep going? What drives you? Like, what drove you?
I think that's interesting. It's interesting you asked that, because
I've seen a lot of parallels.
It wasn't easy. Again, in short, one time, my wife calls me and says her visa has been rejected.
Yes.
So
that was a common pattern.
That was a trigger, like in a common pattern everywhere. But then I had an 8-year-old daughter who is away. Every time she has some functions or events, like I had never missed. And then something happens, where is Papa? And then somebody started telling her, like, why can't we go, or why can't he come? Or you can't go because you don't have a visa. And she hated that word, visa. It was visa stopping her. And she couldn't believe. Like, even for my nieces, I used to go to their events and all that, all the way to Kalimpong. And that was so difficult. And then I have my parents in the refugee camp. And my wife lives in Kathmandu. I sent my daughter in Kalimpong, and my parents, elderly parents, in the refugee camp. And here I am struggling myself.
Yeah.
And I was going through so much anxiety, and
the pressures of just being
was so
alone.
much, because as a son, my childhood desire was to look after my parents.
Yeah.
And, I was very religious about that. And then now I'm here struggling, forget about looking after my parents. So I couldn't sleep for 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, and 4 nights. And then I went to the doctor, and he gave me some sleeping tablets. So it was after the 3rd night. And then I came, and then I was a little stubborn. I said, if I took this, I may get addicted to it. Maybe I couldn't sleep the next day and next day. So I was very adamant that I wouldn't succumb to taking a sleeping tablet. And the 5th night, I couldn't even close my eyes, but then I had to go to work. So I went to the university and then did some assignment, and then I was walking to the Coles supermarket where I was working, Coles Express.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and as I was crossing the road, my vision started to blur, and then I fell and hit the ground, and a stranger sort of grabbed me and dragged me to the pavement, and he saved my life. And he saved my life, but he certainly did change it, and that was a trigger for me to sort of start thinking, what did I do? What if I was killed? Would my daughter be happy? Would she be proud that, my dad died because he was weak? What would my parents be thinking? They had so much high expectations from me, and then here I'm gone, and I married somebody's daughter. What happens to her? So I was thinking, I was really focusing on things that were beyond my control. And I was wasting a lot of my time on that. So I started looking at, I can't do anything about it. But if I started focusing on my studies, maybe I can pass quicker. Or if I started earning $10 extra, maybe I can make that phone call to my daughter. Because those days, even we didn't have mobile phones, anything like that. We had to go to a phone booth and make that call.
Telephone card.
And then you make that call, finally you get connected, and then pa 3 times, and then, you lose all that $10 and before you're able to talk. So the line was so bad. So if I started working a little extra, 1 hour extra here and there, maybe I could earn that $10 extra. So that's when I realized that, all of us go through that. And it's not unique to anybody. We all, when we're going through that, we think I'm the only one experiencing this. And we all go through different challenges.
Different channels, but within the same intensity.
Same intensity, sometimes different intensity, because we react to those differently. So I think the most important thing is, how do you start focusing on things that you have control of?
Exactly.
And not really focus on things you can't control. So there's a thing called, there's a circle of influence and circle of concern. So we tend to focus on that circle of concern. But so much of our time gets wasted. Oh, you know what? This thing happened, the green movement, the white movement, the climate movement and all that. It's good to talk about that. But then, what are you doing about it? Is the most important thing. What actions are you taking?
How you're responding.
What are you responding? If climate change, if you're really passionate about, what is your small contribution? That's the most important. What's your circle of influence? Where are you doing anything within your circle of influence? There are things that you can do. If you're concerned about the environment, am I throwing that little things in the right bins, for example? It's small things like that. I may not be doing that, but then out there I'm talking about, the environment, etc. So we are focusing on that circle of concern, and then the circle of concern starts growing, and then your circle of influence goes smaller and smaller. You can't influence anything because you're not doing anything. So it's really important to start focusing on that circle of influence, so that your circle of influence grows, and the circle of concern grows smaller.
Right.
So that's one thing.
So grasping what's within your control first.
Yes.
Right.
And secondly, I think one of the key messages from my book I wanted to give was, we have realized that you cannot really control what happens to you in life.
Yes.
I was at the top of my world, having the best job in the world.
Yeah.
And like my wife is one of the first public health analysts in the government, and both of us doing really, really well. Have a child, and my parents were doing well. Everything was going hunky-dory.
Yeah.
And then suddenly all that we lost.
World is upside down.
Upside down.
I think
we lost everything.
Even in success, I think everyone pays a cosmic price.
Yeah.
Even if you're the most successful person, a billionaire, there is a unique problem that they themselves only know about, that they face, and it's in equal intensity.
Yeah.
So I think you're very right.
So you cannot control what happens to you in life, but one thing you realize is you can always choose to respond the way you want to. Somebody tells you something bad, I'm walking on the street and somebody shows you a thumb, or somebody tells you something bad. Now, it's your total choice how you respond. Nobody can, in the morning, for example, you get up in the morning. You choose to go to the mirror and say, hey, I look so beautiful today. Just smile. And then get out there. Today I'm going to make a difference in the world. I'm going to do something. Or start thinking, oh, this thing happened. So-and-so got elected in the U.S. Or so-and-so. Look at the, first thing, look at your Facebook or something on the phone, and spoil your day. And then go to work and say, this thing happened. Somebody else coming on the road, and then the traffic jam. You talk about things. So I think you have a choice. You cannot control what happens to you in life, but you can always choose to respond the way you want to. So every single morning, I just get up in the morning, go out there, smile, and wow, this is beautiful. And you look forward to something, what can I give today?
And do you think this comes from experience? Like as you grow, you have to go through the struggles and the experiences to come to that conclusion, I think it's quite easy to say, you can respond, you can choose how you can respond.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? Like, what are the tools,
Yeah.
I haven't learned it.
Yeah.
What do you mean, what do I respond? I've always been this.
Reacting.
How do I do it the other way?
Yeah.
You learn to do anything, there's always a tool, there's always a methodology, there's steps.
Yes.
And a life can be a really good teacher in one way.
Yeah.
Or, if you have a mentor like yourself to a wider community, they can teach you, you're going through these kind of things. Because I remember, like the early refugees that came to Australia once, there was a bill or something like that passed that allowed a lot of the Bhutanese refugees to come over to Australia. Yeah. You were the person, that always was there to, guide them, pick them up from the airport, doing the rounds.
Yeah.
And there were some people that once, like later on, they started getting the dole and then getting a bit complacent.
Yeah.
And they haven't been through that struggle that you've gone through. They have in a different way. But how did they respond? You said some people, had trouble with drugs. How do you deal with that?
I think
what I'm trying to say,
the reason I think I do this now is I don't want people to go through what I've gone through to learn this. So I'm sharing my learning so that it might help somebody else. Because to get these learnings, I almost lost my life a few times.
Exactly. And that's the experience that people cannot have.
Yes.
So you can...
No, we don't want them to have this.
No. Exactly. Because you've gone through it, right? And that's the tool that they need to be able to be like, okay, he's taught me these tools. So now I can choose, I can get it.
Yeah.
I can choose how to respond because they can kind of... I think at some level, you need to experience some things in life to be able to completely... Because if you haven't experienced it, you don't know what it means.
Yes.
Like someone can come up to you and say, hey, I nearly got hit by a car, I got scraped. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Right? Until you've been in that situation, the car is almost scratched you. You don't know the visceral feeling of being nearly hit by a car.
Yeah.
So like choosing how to respond, I think you can give them the tools.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot better. Than like having to, not have any guidance.
That's right. And the tools, I think, starts, like for me, I think the reason I went from telecommunications engineering to I talk about inner engineering is because I wanted to explore that. I went on that journey actually. Like after I decided to leave again, this was a choice. Like I left my job at Telstra and sort of went on this exploratory journey. And I am very fortunate to have an amazing wife because I said, I want to volunteer now. Are you okay? And having a daughter a teenage daughter who would say, hey, Papa, do what you love to do. And for a wife who would say, like, and those days, like, years ago, like, having a 6-figure salary used to be a big dream. And to get there and then to suddenly say, I'm leaving that and, going to volunteer wasn't, unless I had that, support from my family, like from my wife and my daughter, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Whatever I'm doing today is thanks to my wife, Saroja,
which
and my daughter.
Segues into
Smriti.
a really...
So this is really, really important, in terms of taking that step, in terms of in engineering. So coming back to the tools, I think, like, firstly is, I think we sometimes don't look after ourselves. The way we eat, the way we think, they all matter.
Yeah.
And, firstly, I think you start with eating well. Because, we don't eat well.
Yeah, your gut health has
we're so fortunate to be living in a country like this.
where you can choose.
Yes.
Like unlimited options. And it's like scientifically proven that your gut health is very linked to how your mood is regulated.
Yes, of course,
Like basically you eat food, serotonin is released, which is basically a huge neuroreceptor to your mood.
And that's why, like, a lot of my work now, like, I've been appointed honorary adjunct fellow by the Faculty of Health at UTS. So a lot of my work is now, and I work with neuroscience, Australia. So a lot of my work is focused on, again, starting with ourselves. We need to eat well. Eat well, drink well, and eat well meaning, even when you're eating, these days, the, problem of having a phone. My kid doesn't eat without looking at a phone. This is a common saying. And the kids don't know. The parents are doing that.
Yeah.
So, if the parents tease that,
they enable them.
They enable them.
Yeah, by not making a choice of how their environment.
Exactly.
It's a choice. Like I think we discussed it a couple of days ago.
And we got so much choice here. Like go out. Like live in Fairwater. Like you can go out for a walk. Take the kids out. They love outdoors.
Yeah.
But then it's easier for parents to give them a phone and then get them occupied.
Yeah.
So I think just starting eating well. And then secondly, what you're thinking, like, if your brain is going, on, auto mode, then start thinking something and then go on that auto mode and, start thinking whatever is happening. You look at the TV, you look at the news, and then everything's dictated by what's happening externally.
Like reacting.
You're not in control.
Yeah, you're not in control. You're reacting to your
environment. But then are you able to take control of that? And you can do that by simply learning to sit quiet. If you start speaking half of what you're speaking now, and I've learned that hard way because I used to talk a lot, and I think I'm trying not to do that, listen more. And I think we solve a lot of our problems by trying to half the speaking and listening more.
Yeah, my boss used to say, you have 2 years, so listen twice as much as you speak.
And that's so
And it's
true.
actually a lot harder to actively listen than to talk.
Yes. And when you say actively, a lot of people listen with the intent to reply.
Yeah.
They're ready. Susan is saying something, I'm ready to sort of say, this won't work, that won't work. I've already got some ideas there. I'm not listening with the intent to understand. If I listen intently, hey, tell me more.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that? And I learn. But then a lot of people don't do that. So that's where we miss that opportunity.
Yeah. Talking back, I think there was a point, and talking about active listening, maybe I was already preparing a response to segue into that. But you talked about, having a really empowering and inspirational partner in your life. And I think, who you're with is a very big part of your life. Yeah. And I think we were having a discussion, especially because we want this to, there's a lot of us Australian, Nepali, we're stuck in the middle, and the conversation is quite taboo. Yeah. And it's the caste system in Nepali. And I know very well how you feel about that. Yeah. You get sweats and you hate it. But I guess there's no real answer to this, or maybe there is. Maybe you could enlighten us what you've seen in the communities. But I think that gets, in the way, like the caste system, how the division that you talk about, even in communities, I think it's the same thing, oh, they're of a lower caste, upper caste. But ultimately, that's a community thing, right?
Yeah.
My community, Ban, Chetri, whatever, right? That stops a lot of people that are in this society, this community, and they've been brought up in like the Western way or whatever, and they're kind of stuck in the middle. What do? You don't believe in that stuff. You don't believe in, what is caste? Explain to me more. Oh, it's just something. Okay, tell me more. There is nothing there.
Yes.
So how do you navigate between, there's this cultural anchor that you're a part of, but there's also you the individual as a proud Nepali Australian. How do you navigate this? There's no real answer to it, I know, but I just want to discuss what your thoughts are.
This is something we need to have more conversation because, like as you rightly said, I don't think we've got that answer. But then we need to explore, and I think your generation have this opportunity now. Like, where do we want to take this? Because this is where for us, it was. From my childhood, it has been a struggle. I went through very traumatic times, not able to understand why my friends, I had friends from lower caste, like lower caste, which I don't believe. I don't believe in caste. But then they were termed lower caste and we couldn't interact.
I shudder when I say the term caste, lower caste.
And I intentionally make sure that, I interact with them. Even now, like, we talked about the goldsmith. Like, I made that trip all the way in Ohio, and made it very clear to a lot of people that I'm going to see him. And met him and, paid that respect to him because he deserves that respect.
Exactly. You see him as a human.
As a human being, as a mentor, as a, inspiration to inspire, for. So I think this is not easy, but at the same time, if we take the easier path, we'll not get anywhere. So one of the things we have tried to do in Sydney, like within our communities, like we started by saying, we have our older generation. So if my parents in the 80s and 90s, for example, if we force them anything, we have to say, to simplify this, we have to take them to the hospital. If we say that you need to mix around and eat, cooked by everybody, etc., we'd have to take them to hospitals because they'll go through a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety, and trauma. So we have a choice. We don't want to take them to hospital, but we don't want to promote this as well. So we said, okay, let's respect but don't promote. So by that, what we meant was let's respect our parents, how they have grown up. But our generation, like, we have the power to change. So we don't continue this tradition. So at least we can be proud to say that in my generation, I've stopped this. So my daughter would not do this. My grandchildren would do this.
It's interesting that you say that because often we're bound by the cultural expectations. And more than that, I feel personally for myself as well, we're bound by familial expectations. So in order to navigate anything, not just, caste per se, is difficult when, I guess, when we were trying to promote it. But it's interesting that you say respect, not promote. So make your own decisions based on your personal principles and personal values. Obviously not hurting anyone with your decisions, but having the courage to stand up for what you believe in. And I guess educate your parents, for example, in that way or through that pathway in that journey. So to be able to make that decision for yourself.
At some point, be able to take that stand because, like, my wife is Guru, right? So I make it very clear, like I
just to make it clear to the viewers. So you yourself, had to go through that struggle. You loved someone that was not in your caste. And that was not seen as something.
I guess.
Unthinkable, especially in your time, right? But you made a choice.
And I made it very clear. Even like I was so close to my parents, but I didn't want to upset them. So I had to play a really delicate game there. Like, how do I use? And my brother, I mentioned a lot in my book as well. I'm called Small Om, he's called Big Om. So we are technically cousins, but we're brothers, closest of friends. And he's been my savior because my parents listened to him more than me. So it was his sort of, he took that responsible to go and convince my parents. And, they accepted
Yes.
her. So, and then my parents have been so kind and good to her. Like, we're very blessed to have such parents,
Yeah.
But then the community, the wider community
Yes.
is a problem.
Implication.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there, I've sort of always, that's one thing I would always stand by her. If anybody tries to do anything, I stepped in.
Yeah.
And that's where I think nobody has dared to, sometimes, yes, people do come to my place and they don't want to eat, etc. I don't care.
Yeah.
If they don't want to eat, then they're not invited.
Yeah.
You know,
For such
Then
a
they're missing the good food, basically.
exactly. They're lost.
They're lost.
They're
So
lost.
now we don't care, if we don't go make that extra effort to hire somebody from outside to come and cook for them, it's not. And my wife has even sort of left the kitchen so that they can go and cook themselves. And now we said, we don't need to do that anymore. For our parents, we'll do what we need to do. But other people, let's not do that.
Yeah, I think there's a famous Dr. Seuss quote, the philosopher, that says, "Those who mind don't matter; those who matter won't
don't
mind."
Yes.
One
Right?
mind, yeah.
So that kind of philosophy.
So,
But it's super hard with parents.
yes. So with parents, we don't we make that
Balance.
Yeah.
And the balance we created, I think, thanks to my wife again, because she's got that so much capacity to absorb things and tolerate things. Because I have been more aggressive, I think, in that respect. And but she has been the more passive one, where when something is not right, I would step in. But then when it comes to parents, we have never compromised. So whether it's her parents or my parents, they have been our parents. So that's how we have, I think, worked really well. Is when it came to her parents, I was the one who would step in to take care of them.
Yeah.
More than even my wife would do. And it's the same thing with my parents. My wife has been always the one, when we were here in the refugee camp, she would be the one working night and day shift, and then let's take them out of the camp and, had something and send money, etc. So I think that has really helped us. So for any relationships, I would encourage that, lot of time, if you start looking after your in-laws, and vice versa, I think that would make the bond stronger, and they become your parents. A lot of, families have a fight because they'll say, "Oh, she's always looking after her parents," or "He's always looking after his parents," and that becomes a problem. So if you start doing the other way around, you start looking after your wives because your parents are your parents,
regardless of what
anyone says.
But then you got this opportunity to have new parents, and so that's how we've worked. And my mother-in-law has always said, "You're my son," and I've always treated her that way.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, my actually we've got stepmom who is with us now. So again, the two moms have been our moms. Yeah. So we brought her.
So fortunately for you, because your partner was, there's a really good balance between you and your wife, that your families were able to work out the initial, hurdle of actually getting past that stage of caste.
Yeah, but then it was a struggle. We need to have a lot of patience. We need to have that why. Why we want to do this. We want to make this our marriage successful. We love each other. That's the most important thing. Because if you don't have that why, things will fall apart. Because somebody has said something so bad today, and then you get hurt, and then you start pulling apart.
Then you could start drifting, right?
Yes, but then if you have a clear why, then nothing is going to pull us apart. That's our commitment to each other. So once you have that strong why, then we step in where we need to.
Then everything else becomes kind of secondary.
So who needs to? Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So that's why I think even for younger generations, whoever is struggling, have that why. And if you don't, reach out to somebody. I've always benefited from that. In UTS, there are a lot of mentors, and they helped me through, when I was going through really challenging times. So always, when you're young, have at least 2 or 3 mentors. You start looking at, hey, I want to be this person. Reach out to that person. And just throw in a thing, hey, can I buy you a coffee for you? And people love a coffee.
Yeah, of course.
And then say, I just want to, and genuinely start to know how did they get to where they are.
Yeah.
And people love to talk about them.
Yeah, exactly.
You invited me to talk about them, right? So if you ask me one day, like, oh, Uncle, can you help me with my homework? Not that I can help you with that, but something else. Maybe I'll make excuses, right?
Yeah.
But then, oh, Uncle, can you come and talk about yourself? I said, all right. People love to talk about themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think always have 2 or 3 mentors who can, one for your career, one more, more family, whatever,
familial,
more broadly, relationships. So, like you need them at different times.
Yeah.
So have some either formal, informal relationships, or you look up onto somebody. I looked up into somebody called Paul Bourne. Like he's a famous sort of writer. He's a community builder in Canada, and before I met him, I've always followed him and I've learned so much from him. Yeah. And then I happened to meet him when I went to Canada, and then now we've got this friendship, and he's my mentor. Whenever I have struggle about community, whatever is happening, how do I take this to the next level?
Yeah, sorry to disturb you.
He's the one. Yeah.
To disturb you.
Yeah.
I'd love to keep. No, we're not finishing. There's about 5 minutes left till I'm booking. I'd love to talk to you maybe for another hour. but let's just I think let's go into just start wrap up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why you're at this book, what you're doing now. I think we know why you're at the book. To spread the message. Yeah. And what you're doing now, and what's in your future. What are you doing currently to in the community?
Firstly, I think just coming back to the book, why I wrote this was a lot of people know Bhutan as a beautiful country. It is a beautiful country. But a lot of people don't know about what happened during the,
what it
early
is now
1990s. During that time, over 100,000 Bhutanese, or 1/7 the country's population, were made refugees. And not many people know about this. Yeah. So this story had to be told. My father was put in prison, tortured severely for no reason, absolutely no reason, very innocent man. And many others. So it's not my father's story. Many other people, have suffered.
Exactly.
So this needed to be documented, and it's a dedication to my wife. So if you look at the photo here, I had lost my father, and UTS wanted to do a photo shoot for a different initiative.
I see.
And I had taken this photo. And a lot of people ask me, hey, are you a monk? I'm not, but I shave my head because, when you lose your father, you shave your head. So
you shave your head.
This is in dedication to my father.
Yes,
I lost him, but it needed to be told to capture stories like his and many others, because that's the other half of Bhutan's story.
Yeah.
Many people know about that. So.
Do you think the book was a way to reconcile it with your past as well?
It does. It does help in that. So at least it's now captured in this. People can know what happened that time.
Yeah.
And it's also a lot of people write to me from Bhutan clandestinely. They can't do this openly. So many people have read this book in Bhutan.
I see.
And, it's got a bit of a telecom history as well. Not many people know about it. It's not documented anywhere. So I've written how we started telecommunications in Bhutan. And I was the third most senior telecom engineer in the country. So we're part of the building that initial network. So that was one. And secondly, I think the way we have, again, I go back to this main theme was to sort of show that, you cannot control what happens to your life, but you can always choose to respond the way you want to.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. And thirdly, I think it's about refugee settlement. How can you do this differently? It's about community development. How can we do this differently? Focusing on people's strengths and passions, not focusing on people's need. We can still address needs, but by flipping that approach, by focusing on strengths, we can still address needs.
Yeah.
We ask people, what are you passionate about?
Yes.
People talk about it.
Yeah.
But if anyone asks, what do you need? It's not anything exciting.
Exactly.
So, we need to change this narrative, the way we have approached things now.
Yeah.
How do we do that? So, I've developed a strength-based model for refugee settlement. So, I'm trying to socialize that and do more of it. So, that's the main reason.
Cool.
So, what I'm doing now is trying to spread that word.
Yep.
And as I said, I'm also working with academic institutions and at different levels. So, I sit on different boards and committees. For example, I'm with the New South Wales Police Council Advisory.
Yep.
I also sit on the advisory committee in New South Wales Health. So I'm more and more getting involved in health. So I was appointed by the health faculty in UTS as well. So I'm trying to see how we can bring this strength-based approach in research, how we can build our communities on a, helping leaders to take a broader identity so that we create an Australia which is most prosperous. Starting with us as a 3-story nation, we got this indigenous history of over 65,000 years of history.
Yeah.
Now, if we don't recognize that, we're missing out a lot.
Yes.
So we need to start with that recognition of the history, the rich history, because if I tell my history, it's just 26 years old.
Yeah.
But I have this opportunity to leverage this 65,000 years of history and build on that.
Yeah.
And then we also recognize the, European migration and democratic tradition and institutions that they set up.
Yeah.
You switch on the light today, the light comes.
Yeah.
Look at the snowy Hydro Mountains. A lot of people have lost their lives.
Yeah.
And the traffic lights and, all the institutions that have been rebuilt, thanks to the European migration that has built that.
Yeah.
And then now this, we're adding this rich multicultural, thread to the richness of this country by this multicultural.
It's a melting pot.
Melting pot. So all this multicultural, the richness of the multicultural society now. So we are basically a 3-story nation. If we accept that as a 3-story nation, and then we start on this broader identity of we are Australians first.
Yeah.
We all Australians first.
Yeah.
And then whatever diversity we have, whatever differences we have, we add on top to the richness of who we are as a society. That's part of my work now. So I train community leaders and work with different organizations.
I think, that's an amazing thing to aspire to. I wish I could continue talking because I have a lot of stories of, friends and families dispersed within different countries that, you ask them, what is your identity? And they don't know.
Yeah.
So, if we had time, probably would be explored, but I think
coming to identity, we can close with that maybe because I think we all need to work towards developing a broader identity rather than a narrow identity.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people think that, I need to be a leader of my community. And then start asking, what's your community? And tomorrow, if you're really empowered, if you have power, then you're going to give everything to your community, narrow community. Right. And as Australia, we live in Blacktown, we've got people from 188 different countries.
Within Blacktown itself?
Yeah.
We speak 182 languages.
Yeah, wow.
So
that's pretty amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah. We live in, as a child, I wanted to, work for the United Nations, but I now live in United Nations.
Yeah.
And how good is that?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
A lot of people see that as a problem.
Right.
My community, your community.
Your community, there's a division.
Then it's a problem.
Yeah.
So I live in a suburb called Fairwater. Now we're trying to demonstrate that by saying we are Fairwater residents first.
Yeah.
So initially, we form a community association now, and we
start at the micro level.
Yeah, micro level. We have a Fairwater events committee, which comprises of everyone. So whether it's a Christmas celebration or a Eid celebration or Diwali celebration, we got an events committee, which comprises of everyone.
Yeah.
So now we are in organizing end of year events, Christmas. Santa would be there, and you know what? The Santa would be most probably from Nepal originally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yes, last year we had one who was from Nepal.
I remember you yourself had
I was
to do it
once. That time it was COVID time, and the guy who was supposed to be a Santa, he had COVID, so he couldn't make it. So,
but that speaks to the whole, what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and the night before he calls me and says he can't do it. So I called my daughter. What do we do? She said, you be Santa, Papa. I said, what does Santa do? I said, you Google it. So we Google and find out what they do. And the next morning, few people came and I went and said, Santa, hi. She said, no, it's not hi, it's ho, ho.
Oh, God.
That's
and
funny.
we had a lot of fun. So we do that in Blacktown, in Fairwater now. So we are a Fairwater events committee, organizes everything. And it's so much fun. We Halloween, Easter egg hunt, Diwali, or everything is organized by one group, and people from all over the all different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's
and
amazing.
we are Fairwater residents first.
Yes,
and we are Blacktown residents first, and we bring our diversity on top to add to the richness of who we are as a society.
Just humans at first, basically.
Humans at first. Yes, you said it well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we should wrap
Right.
up there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would love to talk to you, but maybe 3 more hours, but we don't have the time, unfortunately.
Thank
but
you.
It was
It's
very
such a-
good to
yeah.
meet you. And
Congratulations on your book.
Oh,
Congratulations
thank you
on
so
your
much.
book. It's honestly, I have no words.
Yeah.
Like, it's inspirational. I admire it so much.
yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for reading it in the first place, and thank you again for inviting me to this. And I just want to congratulate you for starting this. It's going to be a great show. Keep doing it, and
Yeah.
anything I can do, please feel free to.
Oh, that would be much appreciated. And thank
Okay.
you so much for taking the time out of your day. We know how busy you
Yeah.
are.
Thank you.
And the
so thanks for
patience to sit
coming.
here with
Patience.
us.
yeah, exactly. Setting up and everything. So yeah,
Thank you very much.
very heartfelt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, look forward to speaking to you after this, and
Yeah.
Connecting
Alright.
more.
connecting more. Yeah.
Yes, let's do that. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
All right, good.